Hi Sam, welcome back to a Runner's Life podcast. How are you doing?
I'm good, Marcus. I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. We were having a really good conversation before about the Boston Marathon, training, methods, philosophies. It's about time that I started to hit the record button and to get this show rolling. So you were back on episode 34. You were one of my earlier guests back in 2020. So obviously we're in 2022 now. So what have you been up to since then?
Honestly, the typical runner story, a lot of miles, a lot of running, changed job a few times and just been working on those next phases of my life. Big one being, getting married to my wife, Kylie, last year. And then, just got some big things coming up. So yeah, a lot has happened, to be honest, since the last time we jumped on a podcast. So yeah, some exciting stuff to talk about.
Congratulations on getting married. I know it's been a minute now since it's happened. And I think also when we spoke before, I think you'd finished or you were just finishing uni. You were competing at uni. So I know we were talking about some of the interesting conversations about like competing with a team and all that kind of stuff as well. So that was super cool.
Yeah. I mean, the last time we spoke, I'd literally just left the university over here in the States. I just graduated, and I'm not gonna lie to you, I was kind of in a weird spot where I was figuring out what on earth I was going to do in my life after collegiate running. So yeah, I think it would be cool to compare these two podcasts to see what's changed and how I've changed, because I feel like I've certainly changed as a person since the last time we did a podcast. So it's certainly going to be interesting.
In what ways do you think you've changed?
I think my wife will agree with me. I've relaxed a lot more. I'm no longer a little bit crazy about running, about my own running. Yeah, just, I've started worrying about adulting now. I'm in that phase of my life where I'm in my mid-20s and was lucky enough to just be a runner for a number of years. And now I've got all these cool and, well, let's say not interesting stuff like credit scores and taxes and, paying rent and stuff like that I've got to worry about now. So maturity, I'll say, is the word that has mostly changed.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I don't think I asked you this at the time, actually, because I think I was still kind of working through my questions. But what does a runner's life mean to you now?
That's a good question. A runner's life is, I describe it as you're spinning a lot of plates in your life, but running is this gigantic plate that you want to spin. It's for me, it's my passion. It's everything I love. It's often what gets me up in the morning. It's the motivation that drives me in other aspects of my life as well. To me, a runner's life is my life. So I think that'd be the best way to describe it.
So when we say big plate, I mean, it's like sometimes when we have plates, like we drop them, the little ones, and then it's not so bad. But what happens when you drop the big plate then? Especially running, and it happens with a lot of us as runners.
Honestly, it's I mean, and also you got to define what's dropping the plate. I mean, you can drop the plate and break it. Kind of, I'd say that's like getting injured. Yeah. And I think if you've been running long enough, we've all had our fair share of injuries. Knock on wood, nothing too bad. But you often find that you're juggling all these plates in life. And the way I like to think of it is if you've got a passion, that's one of your big plates. You've got your family, you've got, your spouse, you've got, your job, and then you've got your passion, and those are like the big plates, and then you've got loads of little plates alongside it as well. So I guess it's, you drop that plate, you're almost losing your passion for a little bit, but ultimately it's your decision whether you're going to get that back or not. And I think that's the key.
We're getting deep now. It's like, is there a plate or is there no plate?
I think that should be the name of this episode of the podcast, Spinning Plates.
Definitely. So let's jump into your running. So you recently just defended your 10K title. Can you talk about that?
Honestly, I did the race last year for the first time. It's, for those who don't know, it's the Anthem Star 10K. It's in Roanoke, Virginia, over here in the States. It's got the title of America's toughest road 10K. It's got over 2,000 feet of elevation change. It's basically, you run up and down the Mill Mountain, which is a huge mountain. It's about 900 feet of climbing in the space of about a mile and a half, and then it's straight back down it. So it's absolutely relentless. I did it last year for the first time. I was chasing sub 32 for the 10K. I did a bunch of 10K road races, and then at the end of the season, I decided I'm going to try something a little bit different. So I did this race, and I wasn't expecting it to be as bad. I thought it's just going to be a big hill, really. It can't be that bad. And then I'm halfway up the mountain and I'm cursing under my breath, thinking, why have I got myself into this? But I did it again this year, and yeah, it's just incredible. Just the feeling of getting up the mountain, getting to the top, seeing the views, and then racing back down it. It's just a different challenge. I mean, when you spend years chasing times or trying to run on the flat, when you get thrown this different challenge, it's just refreshing. It gave me a different buzz that I think I definitely needed at this part of my career.
Absolutely. And can you talk about that racing aspect as well? Because you're going up the hill, feeling like burning your legs, you've got your competitors around you. What's your kind of mindset like in that sort of that moment?
To be honest, this year I was pretty calm. Last year I was very nervous because you could see the mountain from the start line. And I was thinking, how on earth am I going to get up that? But this year I've been doing a decent amount of training for it. I've been running up and down mountains in Tennessee, in Virginia, in North Carolina where I live. So I felt very prepared for it this year, but I felt very relaxed. The opening mile's pretty much flat, a few rolling hills, and a few of the guys decided to take the pace on, and I could hear them breathing on the flat. So I was thinking, if you guys are breathing at this point, then that mountain is going to be painful. So I just sat in and made my move halfway up the mountain. So I knew my strength was going to be knowing the course, memorizing the course and being strong on the uphill, but also having the good leg speed for the downhill. To give you an example, my third mile on the uphill at the highest grade of incline was a 7:10 mile. And a mile later, I ran 4:45 on the downhill. So yeah, it's brutal, but I found myself being very patient, very relaxed, and not planning too much, just taking it step by step.
It's a bit like cross country, isn't it? It's like you just have to really work for the effort on the ups and the downs, really, and just let go of that consistent pace throughout.
Yeah, I mean, with races like that, you can't plan too much. And I had an athlete racing it as well, but she did the half marathon. And I said, we can't go in with a plan for every mile of this race because we don't know what's going to happen. Like, ultimately, we can plan for the first mile. Then after that, we're going up a mountain. So you've literally just got to listen to your body, take it easy to begin with and work your way through it. So similar to cross country, thankfully no ankle deep mud over here, but yeah, certainly a different kind of challenge.
Absolutely. And just going back to what you said before, I thought was really interesting. It's those subtle things that we don't always appreciate. Like you were saying, like when you watch like two boxers, like pro boxers, and the first round they're kind of filling each other out, they're throwing jabs, they're throwing feints, they're just seeing how people react. And like you noted the point there about just like you can hear the breathing, on the flat. And I mean, these little things that people probably don't pay attention to because they're just focusing on their own race. I think that's really important to see like those little things that you're picking up as well.
Yeah, it's almost listening to your competitors, but also, trying to get feelers out there, because I'll often find myself talking to people on start lines anyway. I like, it's my favorite part of racing, just getting to, that shared sense that we're all in this together. We're going to try and beat each other as soon as that gun goes, but ultimately we're all doing the same thing here. We're all going the same way. It's that shared sense of enjoyment but dread at the same time. So so yeah, I was trying to talk as much as I could for the first few minutes of the race, just trying to get a feeler out to see how people were feeling, just trying to be sociable. And yeah, I could definitely tell when we got to the base of the mountain that I was going to win this.
I love that championship mindset, mate. When it's like you're saying, it's like, because I was thinking about initially, was it due to nerves? But I don't think it was, because I think you were confident in your ability. Like you're saying, just like seeing how everyone else is, and it's like celebration. You're there. You're ready to race. It's so many factors that come into play. So it's really interesting hearing that perspective as well from the start.
Yeah, I mean, I used to get very, very nervous when I was a junior, but I found the older I've got, once you've been in that situation time and time and time again, where you're kind of in that vulnerable situation where you might win, you might lose, you might PR, you might not. You just learn to deal with it. And I don't know, it's rare that I get nervous these days. I find I find comfort in knowing that I've been there and done this before. And if I win, great. If I lose, great. It happens, just working through it is the key.
But going back to that thing about the nerves, but do you think it's more the fact that because it's something you've been doing such a long time, as opposed to like something completely new, like outside your comfort zone, which is why that fear factor might not be as strong as it was when you're coming up.
Yeah, I guess it's that repetitiveness of I found it especially during when I was racing track a lot, that I just done it so many times that it nothing was new at this point. And although I may win the race, may set a personal best, or may get absolutely spanked and finish dead last, ultimately I've experienced the high and I've experienced the low, and I've experienced a ridiculous amount of in the middle with those mediocre, average kind of performances that I think we all have at times. So I just didn't feel as nervous. Now, I do still get nervous for certain races, with if there's a championship or if there's, a huge race where I'm chasing a certain standard or something, then I get nervous. But for the majority of races these days, it's just see what happens and ultimately enjoy it.
I know we've always spoken about recent race last year, cross country championships as well. Obviously, prior to that, college. Do you know what I mean? We're talking about that, competing at a high level there. So, kind of, what's next for you right now in your running?
Yeah, I've kind of been speaking to my wife about it a lot the past few months, and I've ultimately decided that this year will be my last year competitive running. I've been running for 13 years. For 10 of those years, I've been what I'd like to class as competitive, where I've been taking it seriously and living the sport day to day and sacrificing a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of money, a lot of time with my family and friends. I've given everything I've got to the sport, basically. And I'm not going to call it a retirement speech or a retirement kind of party or anything like that, because ultimately I wasn't a professional. I was a competitive runner like many people are. But for me, I've kind of been reflecting on my career, where I've gone, where I started. Yeah, I've come to the decision to take a step away and ultimately move on with the next phase of my life, which is going to be coaching full time. That's something that I'm very passionate about, and something that, I've given a lot of thought over the past 6 months or so at what I ultimately want to do and where I want to channel all my energy into. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
I mean, obviously it's an exciting phase moving into the coaching side, but can you talk a little bit about, making that decision to step back from competitive running, and like, how do you make that decision? I imagine it wasn't an easy decision to make.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately I had to reflect on, am I happy? Have I been happy with what I've achieved and where I've been and what I've done? And for a long time, I never really appreciated a lot of the stuff that I had done. My mindset for a number of years was do something, achieve that goal, then just put it in a drawer. What's next? And keep moving forwards. And I hit a point last year where I won the American Amateur Union cross country title. A guy like me won a national championship, which is almost surreal to think about. But, that moment kind of gave me a lot of closure and gave me almost a feeling of, you know what, you've achieved something magical, something that you never thought you'd ever do. And now it's time, to move on. I looked upon all the things that running's given me, education, opportunity, meeting some incredible people, getting to do some incredible races. And I think that it's given me pretty much everything that I've needed. It's given me that discipline, that structure in my life. And ultimately it's kept me on the straight and narrow and kept me on a path of, discovering who I am as an individual and as a person, and ultimately now as a coach. So it was a big decision, but I had to look at a few different factors. I mean, one of the main factors was, where do I want to be in 10 years' time? Like, which direction does my life want to travel now? And I figured out that I could keep being a competitive runner, keep, paying the money to go to races, buying shoes, putting all this energy and time into it, but ultimately taking time away from my ability to coach. I'm very open, and I'm very, I know my personality, and I know that if I'm going to do something, I want to do it to the best of my ability. And if I'm going to invest a bunch of time and effort into something, I want to do it right. And I think I'd be doing kind of an injustice to myself if I continued running but wasn't taking it as serious. Like, I know that probably wouldn't be a good thing for my personality and my mental health ultimately. So I know that if I want to be the best coach I can be, that I need to step away from my own running and take away that selfishness and start being more selfless and focusing on my athletes instead. Which honestly, that's something that's made it a lot easier the past 6 months. I've been coaching a lot. At one point, I had over 40 athletes I was managing. So that's a lot of time and energy going into that. And I wasn't thinking about my own running whatsoever. And when that started happening, I knew that, okay, maybe this is something we need to consider. So yeah, that's kind of one of the main reasons. And another thing that I think a lot of British runners probably aren't aware of, but in America, being a post-collegiate runner, unless you're a professional, it's very difficult. There's no infrastructure here. There's running clubs, but there aren't many places or races or opportunities for guys who are at that level where they're decent, but they're not good enough to be pro or good enough to make Olympic trials and stuff like that. So it's kind of a big drop off, a big gap where in order to get the opportunities and people to train with, you need to move to different locations. And I'm just not in that phase of my life that I'm willing to do that. So a lot of thought and, a lot of contemplation went into this decision, but ultimately I know that it's going to be for the best of my coaching career and the best for my future.
Yeah, perfectly explained there. And like you're saying, it's not an easy decision, but like you said, and you've shown like you've considered the factors of like where you are, where you'd like to be, and all those things. And do you know what I mean? I think, yeah, it makes a lot of sense what you're saying. It's definitely not easy. And I can imagine, like you're saying, there's lots of runners kind of similar to the situation. You're saying like they either keep trying and don't get to that stage where they like to be and keep outlaying, but not get any further. It's a big risk. Like you're saying, there's not like a great support structure there unless you're right at the top. So I think, yeah, what you're saying makes sense. But I also want to go back to something you said about the coaching as well. And something a former coach said to me, which you just said actually makes a lot of sense, is he said it to me as well. He said, I think I'm a better coach now that I don't run. And it's like it's hard to be a good coach if you're still running competitively yourself. You've got to be quite selfish. Not selfish, like, the world just revolves around me, but it's quite hard to be a competitive runner and coach other people. Not saying it's impossible, but do you know what I mean? It's not easy.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest challenges I've faced. I found it, especially when I first started my coaching business, I only had a few athletes, so it was kind of easy to manage. And often I was at races with them where I'd see them on the circuit, so it wasn't a big deal. But then you find yourself away racing, you've got your own workouts to do, and you start worrying about your own workouts and where you've got to be instead of where your athletes are. And kind of a switch happened for me around about October, November. I got injured during my marathon build-up and then did a few cross-country races and had some great fun there. And then after that, I kind of sat down with myself and I said, well, if you're going to be a coach going forwards and if that's going to be your long-term goal, you need to stop worrying about what you're doing and worrying more about what other people are doing. So ever since that kind of reflection happened, I've taken a step away from my own running and stopped really focusing and caring as much. And I've started really putting my eyes and ears and my whole heart and passion into other people. I think a lot of athletes, I know in other sports it's very different. I know you hear about a lot of football players who suffer with like mental health issues and depression and stuff when their competitive days are over. I think in track and field and running is very unique because there's a place for us. When you stop competitive running, there's a place and there's going to be people there who are going to want to hear about your days as a runner, but ultimately learn from the stuff that you learned. I know a lot of runners will go through their entire competitive career having learned nothing about what they were doing. And that's just how some people are. They're not bothered about learning stuff. I had teammates here who they did 4 years of college here under the same coach and they didn't know what lactic threshold meant, even though they'd been doing it for 4 years. And then you've got other athletes who listen to every little detail. And I think you'll probably agree with me on that we're quite similar in that sense, where we listen and we learn and ultimately to get better as runners ourselves. And then eventually you find you come towards the end of your career and you've got all this information that in any other walk of life is pointless and you don't need to know. So you think, well, what am I going to do with it? And then you start giving it back to other people. And, that's made it easier for me, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you're saying, always be curious, asking the questions. And I think good coaches actually like that because it sort of shows like you're actually taking in, you're thinking about what works and what doesn't work for a certain period of time. And I think another great bit about being a good coach is understanding people. And as our conversation offline before, we were talking about the Boston Marathon and some of the certain tactics and things between athletes, and what you demonstrated was actually like the well-rounded idea of just like maybe what they're thinking about, reasons behind it, all these kind of things. And I think that is so important to have that, because coaching isn't just like, here's a plan. There's so many other factors that you've got obviously experience of that you can, put and transfer into your athletes as well.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, and I never thought about this, but coaching isn't always about how, your ideas as a coach. Often it's about people management and how can you make people tick. And I never understood what that meant until I went to Cardiff Met and I was coached by James Fee. He's a phenomenal coach. One of his biggest strengths is people management. Like, he had a way, and my wife laughs at me now because if I get off the phone with James, I just want to run for a brick wall. Like, I'm ready to go. Like, I'm not afraid of any challenge. Like, he has this ability to sit down with you for 5 minutes for a coffee. And you'll leave that 5-minute meeting feeling sky high. And I think that's something that I desperately want to take into my coaching, is making people feel $1 million and understanding them as a person. Because personally, I don't think if you don't understand the athlete, you can't help them to the full ability. A training plan will take you so far, but actually understanding how an athlete's mind works, whether you need to big them up or whether you need to knock them down a few pegs, just understanding them as a person will ultimately make them a better runner and allow you to give them the kind of training that's going to work with them. So understanding people is something that I'm still learning. I'm still learning that. That's something that I want to get better at. But it's something I think is critical for coaches.
Yeah, totally agree. I think that people side is so important. Same as you, still learning that process. Like you're saying, you can have the programs, the workouts, but it doesn't really matter unless you know what makes that person tick, and you can relate to that person, because people buy people. So it's a great point. And also, we've spoken about people. And this next question, literally, we probably could spend hours talking about it. So I'm going to try and see if we can sum it down in a little bit easier. So can you talk a little bit about your coaching philosophy and like what your guiding principles are?
Yeah, my coaching philosophy is something that I've been coaching for a few years, but ultimately I've been really trying to nail down who I am as a coach and focusing on it for the past 12 months. And my main thing is making sure that the training is personal. I believe in treating each individual differently, in the way of each person needs something different. Over here, the college system is very much one shoe fits all. That happens quite a lot. And I know that's not the case everywhere. I know a lot of programs that it's not like that. And for me, I think if you can give each athlete what they need, then they're going to be more successful. And that goes back to the point of understanding them as a person. Looking at the history, looking at what they've achieved, of what they need to work on, figuring out strengths and weaknesses, and then working from there. The main mantra I believe in is building aerobic machines and monsters. In order to be a better runner, there's no shortcut. You've got to run. So keeping it simple, starting off with the basics, and then ultimately working up to more structure and more kind of specialist training. So my main thing is building aerobic monsters, and using the analogy of every runner's training plan and every runner should be like baking a cake. And I know we've talked about that before. That's something James, when I was at Cardiff Met, taught me about, and it's ultimately his philosophy is baking a cake. And you need all these different ingredients. If you just do one thing, say if you've got your flour, which is easy running, if you just do easy running constantly, then you don't have a cake. You've just got one ingredient, which is flour. Whereas if you add all these extra things in, you can make a more rounded cake and ultimately be more successful. So those are my main things as a coaching philosophy.
Yeah, I love that cake analogy. We spoke about it before, and it really does. It's one of those things that sticks in your head, actually, and it makes a lot of sense when you think about all the things that make it work. But yeah, I agree about the aerobic side. And I've spoken to other successful runners, more experienced runners than myself, and you were asking like, what is the secret thing? And I remember one guy a guy called Chris Finnell. He's one of the ever presents. Basically, he ran 30 years consistently as sub 3. Basically, like, if anyone knows anything about running, this guy knows about running. And I said to him, like, what would you do? And he's just like, I literally just do like lots of easy runs on the hills because where he lives is so undulating. He's like, just do that every Sunday, and like he's older than me, but like the dude is fit. Like, seriously, like I was like, he'll leave you in the dust. So like, and you can see like how all that aerobic fitness over the years like is built up to make him what he is. Like, it's not something he's just fallen upon. Do you know what I mean? And it really does count.
I mean, it's. I find that a lot of runners they'll try and overcomplicate their training and overcomplicate stuff. And if there'll be a lot of running coaches, so many incredible running coaches out there, but I'll see some people just really overcomplicating stuff. And when you get down to it, running is the most simple sport on the planet. We don't need to be good at any skills. We don't need anything like that. Ultimately, you just need to run. There's a lot of structure we can put to it. And my training is very much like the American system over here, the Jack Daniels methodology with a lot of periodization. I believe in periodization. I think it's so important, especially if you've got a goal race and especially with marathon training too. I think that's so critical. But just keeping it simple. I mean, there's no need to overcomplicate stuff. There's no magic formula, no magic recipe or magic workout that makes a runner. It's just years of consistency is the key.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And can you tell us a bit about your coaching business and name, how people can get in touch with you?
Yeah. So my coaching business is called Team Homestretch. We were founded in the summer of 21. So it's a very new, up and coming kind of coaching business. So far we've had over 60 athletes we've had come through Team Homestretch. We offer in-person training, but we're based in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, or we offer a lot of online training. Typically, we coach people from beginner level. We've got runners who are learning to run. They're doing run-walk intervals, teach them the basics of running, warm-ups, drills, hydration, nutrition. And then we've got people who are seasoned marathon runners who've been running for 10, 15 years, qualifying for the Boston Marathon, kind of everything in between. So ultimately, we cater for all abilities, all age groups. And really, we've got a place for everybody on that team. We've got an incredible online community with Facebook group, WhatsApp groups, and we have regular Zoom calls. I want to give a shout out to our community captain, Katie McAllister. She's everyone's biggest cheerleader, everyone's biggest fan. She's an incredible runner herself, but she's an incredible community captain. And, she gets involved in all that stuff, and she really, really does help this team and help this business. My main thing was I know a lot of online coaches, and I didn't want to be an online coach that just advertised himself. I wanted it to be a community for everyone where we celebrate everyone's achievements, whether you just finished your first 5K or whether you just broke a state record like one of our middle school girls did. I wanted to create that community where we get together, we have socials, but ultimately we support and kind of lift each other up, throughout everything. So it's a little bit different from a lot of online coaching businesses. It's actually a team. When you coach by me, you join a team, and then we do stuff together. So that's the key.
I really like that. I think community, teamwork, having great people like Katie definitely helps bond things together and make people feel connected, like you're saying, especially in these times. I think it's so important. So I think that's a great way to kind of move things forward, especially with what you're doing. So we've spoken about the coaching, and recently I've transitioned a little bit from the marathon to mile training, and I'm obviously mindful, obviously you're specialist like 10Ks, that kind of distance and stuff. So I'm going to be asking some questions about the mile. I know you've done some as well, and you've got some good experience as well. We spoke about some Pacific mile training as well in the build up to this one, so that's really cool. So I just wanted to speak to you really about, like, I guess, mental techniques, really. Like, what advice would you give to someone who's training to do a mile on a track? So you've got like just over 4 laps to go, haven't you? So how would you kind of advise someone to approach that?
Well, I know obviously it's a very different challenge for you, Marcus. I was a 10K guy, so stepping down to the mile was similar for me. It was, it's a different ball game completely. The main thing is though, breaking it down. It may be a shorter distance, but it will hurt you a lot more than a marathon will, a lot quicker. So ultimately breaking it down, taking it lap by lap. I always like to think of, with a mile, if you're racing on the track, you've got variables you can control. You know what the facilities are going to be like. You know that you're going to be flat, so you don't have to worry about any hills. So breaking it down lap by lap, having mini micro targets that you've got for every lap. The key is not going off too quick. It's like anything. If you go off too quick in the opening miles of a marathon, you're going to pay for it. It's the same with the mile. If you're trying to break 5 minutes for the mile and you go off at 62, 63 for the first lap, then it is going to be a painful second half of that race. So breaking it down, figuring out what splits you need, and ultimately once you get through the first lap or two, just go race and have some fun. But also, you'll know from doing multiple races, you're always going to hit a rough point. Like, it's rare that you do a race where there isn't a little rough patch, whether it's a few seconds, a few minutes, maybe, half an hour in a marathon. You never know. But just realizing before every race I did like that, I said to myself before, this is going to hurt no matter what. Like, this is going to be painful, but it's not going to last forever. You've got 5, 6, 7 minutes of pain, and then you're done. You can feel sorry for yourself after. Just go out there, have some fun, put yourself in that pain box, and then, just know that it'll be gone. It'll be done very shortly. So,
just going back to what you said there, is it something that you consciously embrace when it happens? Like, some people love that when it's getting really hard. That's for the moment they feel like it's working hard. They're working hard and they can sort of kick on. Some people, have that mantra, but when it happens, they just fade and they just don't like it. Like, how did you kind of deal with, obviously, pre-race, it's gonna hurt, I'm gonna be fine, so when it does start hurting, what the space between and it meets, what happens there for you?
I've always been very good at talking myself through situations like that. I'm not huge into psychology, but I've found certain techniques that work really well for me. I really liked Clive Woodward. So Clive Woodward, the England rugby coach, he had a mantra that he told the entire England team before the World Cup. It was just a little analogy. It was teacup, thinking calm under pressure. And I kind of played my own twist with that. And whenever I got myself in a situation where I was hurting desperately, and you're in that situation where you're thinking, I can't go on here, I just keep repeating to myself, teacup, teacup, teacup. And it was almost like off Bad Boys when they're like, ooh, sir, that similar thing. It's like a mantra that calms you down. And for some reason, that worked really well for me.
Yeah.
I know most people wouldn't expect a Bad Boys mention in this podcast, but for me, it worked wonders. And also knowing that every bad patch isn't going to last. It feels like it will. When you're in that moment, you think this is never going to end. You think I'm going to be feeling like garbage for the rest of this race, but it's not true. I've been halfway through a 10K feeling like I'm going to die. And then 2 laps later, I feel fine again. So just reminding yourself that those rough times aren't going to last. They will pass. You just got to keep grinding.
Love that. It's just you found a way to ground yourself within that moment, within all that kind of stuff happening. So it's interesting to sort of see how you sort of go from different race distances and how I'm going to try and find my own sort of anchor.
I mean, the mile especially is a different kind of pain, especially to the marathon. Most people would think that, I'm running 25 miles less, so it must be easier. But as you'll know, it's really not. Everyone's going through different kinds of pain. There's qualities you can take from marathon training and running marathons, the mental toughness that takes. You can take that into the mile. It's just, like you said, it's more concentrated. It happens a lot quicker. And you don't have as much time to make a decision. You'll be in that moment, you'll be hurt, and then you have to make a decision. Do I kick on and keep holding this, or do I back off? And ultimately, you'll know in that moment which decision you're going to make. But just knowing that, like I said, it's not going to last forever. That pain will subside eventually. And that's the key.
Absolutely. Sam, that's some great advice. Thanks for jumping on, speaking with me again for a Runner's Life podcast. How can people get in touch with you?
For Team Homestretch, we're on Instagram and Facebook. At Team Homestretch is our handle. And then me personally, my Instagram handle is at Sam Lloyd-Perks. I'm still fairly active on there. Not as active as I used to be, but I'm still on social media a decent amount. So yeah, if you're looking for a team to join, if you're looking for some free advice or some coaching, just reach out. We've got some awesome opportunities there. And, we cater for all abilities, all age groups, and, just anyone who wants to improve their running. That's exactly what we're there for.
Perfect. And I'm going to put all those details in the show notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'm going to put in the notes below. But yeah, Sam, thank you for being a guest on the Runner's Life. Thank you for watching. If you're listening on the podcast, please rate, subscribe, share with your community. And same if you're watching on YouTube, please rate, subscribe, leave your comments, let me know how you found their content. Reach out to Sam as well. And thank you again for watching. Take care. Awesome, mate. I'm going to stop recording. So that's the end of the episode. Thank you for watching this part of the mile training series. I really appreciate it. It would really help me if you could please rate, subscribe, and leave a comment and share with your community. This helps this platform grow. And also, I want to say a big thank you to Days. They produce alcohol-free ale and lager. And as a dad, to be honest, I can't drink and get hungover. I just find like I'm always on alert, and also I just want to be healthy for running. So for me, this is a really nice compromise between the two, without having to live a monk's existence, but also being able to have a beer. So check them out. You can get 15% if you make an order using the code MarcusRuns15. Again, it's MarcusRuns15 to get 15% off your order. So again, check it out. Thank you for watching, and take care.